Welcome to Buckets. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and this is your Most Improved Player NBA Best Bets Award for 2025. We're going to break it down for you. We're going to give you exactly who wins this award, how they win it, who you should look for, who you should avoid. We'll look at some historical markers, when to bet the award, all of that on today's show. And to do that, I've got with me Matt Altman. You can find him on Twitter and in the Action Network app at NBA First 3. That's what he covers. He is an absolute demon when it comes to betting futures as well as first 3-pointers. He's got lots of props in there for you to follow in the Action Network app. So at NBA First 3, making his Buckets debut. Glad to have Matt alongside me. Matt, God damn it, there's too many of us. This podcast is produced by Matt Mitchell. It's just a nightmare. There's just so many Matts. Everything we talk about today can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. It's the best way for you to track your picks. You get up to second information where the bets and the money are coming in on. You can track Brandon Anderson's. All of his future bets are in there as well. By the way, be on the lookout for next Friday begins Brandon Anderson's. I'm giving Brandon a solo show. So Brandon's doing a solo show every week on Fridays starting next week. So be on the lookout for that in your feeds. Also, make sure to check out youtube.com/The Action Network. Not only can you catch Buckets there, not only can you get Buckets live, which will be going live after games, doing picks, etc., doing all the reacting to the games, all sorts of great stuff. But you can also get Green Dot Daily, which gives out, like, Raybon went 6-0 last week, and his first pick that he gave out this week on Action Platforms was given out on Green Dot Daily. So you want to go ahead and turn on notifications for the live shows at youtube.com/The Action Network. All right, Maltman. We're enough messing around. Thanks for joining me tonight on the show. All right, let's talk about NBA Most Improved Player. So it's a difficult award, I think, in a lot of ways. It's been messy. It's either messy or hyper predictable. But I'm curious right off the top. Let's go ahead and get to the meat on the bone here. What are your best bets for Most Improved Player 2025?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. I'm very excited to be here making my Buckets debut. My best bets, I have two off the bat. Jalen Williams of the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 2,200. And then another Jalen Johnson at plus 2,200 also. Those are my two best bets for Most Improved Player for this upcoming year.
Yeah, there's Jalen's in the NBA. Like, there's Matt's at Action Network. Just like too many of them.
For sure.
And just they're all over the place. Because guess what? I'm taking another Jalen. My best bets are Jalen Suggs plus 3,400. You can find him longer than that in the market, but that's one of the numbers that I got. There's actually a much longer number than that. You can catch it in the market. And Franz Wagner at 60-1. Nothing but long shots on the board tonight. So, hey, if you're going to take shots, I think it's good to take long shots here in the market, especially when we look at what the market says as far as, once again, we'll get to it, but the favorites in this market, I think, are just hilarious given everything, and it seems like very much a default. Sometimes the market on this award is very much like there's an easy-to-identify candidate, and instead this year, the books are just like, Victor Wembanyama, that sounds good. We'll just put Victor Wembanyama at the top of everything. It'll just be like, Victor, he's going to win six-man somehow, and the Coach of the Year, Victor Wembanyama, is the favorite to win that award. All right, I got some questions for you. Good.
No, I was completely shocked when I saw that Webby was the favorite as well. It's completely and totally out there. But yeah, let's hit the questions.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. We'll talk about why here in a little bit. Let's start here. I like asking this question on these deep dive pods. What's the first thing that you look for when you're trying to identify who to bet on for Most Improved Player?
So during the season, I'm looking for who is going to be an NBA All-Star because the last 6 winners and 8 of the last 10 have been NBA All-Stars for their first time. And before the season, I'm looking at who could be an All-Star, but also I'm looking for who has more opportunity this year than they had in the past. So typically that means that someone has left the team that was a high scorer, or they have a new coach or some sort of new situation where we can expect their usage to go up. As that's been the last 20 winners have all had that be the case on their team.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see this transition. So kind of as we look back at the history of this, I think this has been really interesting that it shifted away from guys. Like if you look back, even just 15 years, which listeners to the podcast know, it's when I've started to like angle trends towards. Like we go back to 2010, Aaron Brooks, role player, just like a role player, came out of nowhere, did really well for the Rockets, got the award. Kevin Love, now that's a name that like very highly touted, right? Went very high in the draft, 5th overall pick. Kevin Love, and he had that season where he basically grabbed every rebound known to man once they stopped not playing him. Ryan Anderson, role player, right? And then you got Paul George, who was drafted 10th and was kind of like hey, he made like a real star leap. That's like the first one that you kind of see here. Goran Dragic, who was way older than most of these guys. He was 27 and is one of the highest on the board in terms of who is the oldest in these last 15 years. He is the oldest to have won the award. And then Jimmy Butler made a big jump. CJ McCollum, another role player. And then we enter in like the last 5 years. And when we look at the last 5 years, last year, Tyrese Maxey, as you mentioned, all-star. Lauri Markkanen, all-star. Even for a not playoff team in the Jazz, got to that kind of level. Ja Morant, MVP candidate. That's how big of a jump that he made. Julius Randle. Like, again, these are all highly touted top 10 picks that wind up making these kind of jumps. It's very noticeable to me that we shifted from picks like 49th for Ryan Anderson and 45th for Goran Dragic, 30th for Jimmy Butler, and now in the last 5 years, it's Maxey was 21, but it's 7-2, 7-2 is the rest of them for where they were drafted. So we're seeing this more pedigree. It's guys that have a high pedigree who make big jumps is what we're seeing now in the modern era.
I took a look at this last year and I came to the same conclusion. So like from 2002 to 2012, 7 of the 12 winners did not lead their team in scoring, and we had only 3 of them make the All-Star team. And since then we've had 9 of the 12 have led the team in scoring, and 9 of them have made the All-Star team as well. It's just been a complete and total shift from the award. And I dove in, and in 2013, I looked up, like, Grievous Vasquez was playing for the Hornets at the time, and he increased his points per game average by 8.9 points on a team that won 27 games, and he came in 3rd place for most improved player. And last year, not the past year, but the year before, like, PJ Washington did basically the exact same thing, and he got no votes for most improved player because we've just completely shifted on what we're looking from the award, from someone who is a bench guy to a starter on a real team to someone who's already a starter and already a decent player to an all-star or all-NBA caliber player. So it's been a complete shift, and I think that's going to continue this year as well.
Team wins is usually something that we tie a lot into a lot of our awards talk. It's a little all over the board with most improved players. So the lowest in the last 15 years is 30 wins. That was the Brandon Ingram on the 2020 COVID shortened Pelicans.
So
the most.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, nothing. I was going to say that we haven't had lower than 34 adjusted wins since Kevin Love won in 2011. Nice. And so that is like basically the threshold I'm looking at, is because we're looking for someone who has at least played some competitive games over the course of the year, right? Like Lauri Markkanen, even the Jazz were good. They were competing. They were trying to get there. That year when Ingram won, it was the same thing. They were a team that was competing, that was winning games. They didn't just like throw in the towel and have a guy like Cam Thomas on their team just averaging like 25 points a game for a team that was losing every game by 30 points.
Yeah.
I definitely take wins into account as well, for sure.
The experience thing I think is interesting because there does seem to be this very consistent trend that it's between your 3rd and 6th year. We have a couple older than that. We have the 7th for Julius Randle. Goran Dragic was a 6th, but everybody else is within 3 to 6 years. And so kind of like if we put this all together, we're looking at, all right, who's somebody who has a pretty high pedigree, made a big jump, made an all-star team, 3rd to 6th year, and there's some other statistical categories. Is there any other sort of marker that you're looking for outside of that?
Yeah, this isn't as relevant this year, but I'm looking for someone who actually played the year before, which seems so obvious. But in the past, we've seen guys like Zion be close to favorite after not playing the year before. And just guys like that have never won the award. They just don't win after not playing. It's not the same thing as in football. It's often compared to comeback player of the year. And this is handled completely differently, where someone who doesn't play is not really considered. The other thing I also look for is someone who I think has a good chance to finish top 2 on their team in scoring. So we're really looking for someone who's either going to be the best player of the team or the second best player of their team. Other than like Pascal Siakam, who won, I think all the rest of them basically fit into that category.
give me the numbers again on how many of the last whatever have led their team in scoring.
So it was 9 of the last 12 have led their team in scoring. And so the ones who didn't were CJ, Pascal, and then Maxey last year did not.
Okay, well, we have Jalen Williams, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner, and none of those are gonna lead their team in scoring. So those bets are already sunk. I'll go ahead and just burn those tickets right now. Just go ahead and set those on fire. That's a concerning trend, but
yeah, it's a concerning trend. But we are sort of seeing that these top tier guys on these teams are scoring more and more points, and that the second tier players who in the past may have averaged 20 points a game are now averaging closer to 25. So Maxey last year was clearly the second leading scorer on his team, but he shouldered a ton of usage for a second best player that in the past we wouldn't have seen that from guys who were not the number one option.
Okay. What's the best time to bet this award? I think is a really interesting question. I will say this is one that you can get really good value in preseason, and you're not just kind of firing blind because of what Matt said, which was you can project opportunity. And so there's been cases where like CJ McCollum was one where we were just all like, oh yeah, CJ's winning most improved next year. Like there was zero question because the Blazers moved the shooting guard that was in front of him, and it was very evident that CJ McCollum was going to step into the role and have a lot of usage, score a lot of points, and be right in that conversation. Maxey is interesting because we were actually on him here at Action the year before last, is we were like, oh, he's going to get a lot more opportunity now with everything going on with Ben Simmons. So Tyrese Maxey's going to get it. And then Maxey had a year where he was hurt and the team was real up and down and he just couldn't get on the same page. But he wound up winning last year, which I think is very interesting that like Maxey, we're just like a year too early on most improved. That seems pretty rare. But I think you can get a lot of good value early in the market. The biggest thing here is especially early season. And what I mean by that is in the first 3 weeks, there's a strong, this is like six man. There is a strong chance that someone comes out and is just like, oh, he's going to win most improved. Like he's in a way bigger role. He's got the pedigree. So we don't think this is like fluke scoring because there's always that question, right? Of like, let's say Jalen Suggs, if Jalen Suggs comes out and averages 21 points per game for the first like 4 weeks, I'm going to be dancing in the streets, right? But what are the odds that Jalen Suggs keeps up a 21 point per game pace over the course of the season versus if you look at some of the other candidates on the board and like the question of like, can they get there? Like that's one of the things I think guides the market is like, okay, maybe this guy just made that big of a leap. Like if Jalen Williams is scoring 21 points per game, it would be a little surprising given how good Shea is, but maybe the Thunder are just a wagon and they have that much scoring to go around. And so if you wind up in that kind of spot, it's going to become very obvious. So this one is an award that I think you need to be, if you want to bet into it, you don't want to get into it too late. Now, last year, we really like, it was kind of wide open. Everybody was like, I guess Maxey? You know, and then it was like, Kobe White maybe? But then, no, okay, it's Maxey. So there's not really this like, there's sometimes, if there's not a clear candidate, that's where we have good opportunities throughout the season. But I do think you need to be receptive to early season about catching on in case there's one name that's like, oh yeah, he's going to win.
Yeah, I think there's really 3 times to really bet, as you were saying. So early season is definitely one. Preseason, because we can actually see who might have more opportunity. Last year, I remember thinking the same thing about Maxey, but I didn't believe that Harden was necessarily going to get traded, which was a mistake on my part. And we'll get into that, I think, later about a specific candidate for this upcoming season. But the moment Harden was traded, it became clear, oh, his usage is going to be way higher. And that was the opportunity to pounce on him. And then I actually think there's a third time, which is right when either All-Star returns come in or right after the All-Star teams are announced. Because last season, it was very clear Maxey was the only first-time All-Star on the team. And he was going to be the guy historically that's going to win the award almost all the time. And he was still like minus 150 in the market, which seems crazy to bet a minus 150 at that point. But it was very obvious he was going to win. And those odds were just, I mean, it's like 80, 90%. And minus 150 implies 60%, which is a huge, huge difference. And even with the Philadelphia playing rough at the end of the year and Kobe White coming on, he still ended up winning, which was basically the worst case possible scenario, and he still pulled it out.
Yeah, it's a great point, I think, about the All-Star returns, because I did identify that last year as, hey, when those first returns come out, like even just the first returns, you're going to see somebody pop and it's going to identify who that player is. So be on the lookout for those first returns, because like any first-time All-Star, you need to consider for the award.
Yeah.
Like if it's a veteran, like if Aaron Gordon pops up on the first returns or something, that's crazy. But like, no. But
yeah, sure. When Andrew Wiggins was a first-time All-Star a few years back, like he was not a contender for the award.
No. Okay. So you got in here a note about the types of candidates and which ones win. I wanted to ask you about what are the types of candidates that win this one.
Yeah, so we've gone over that a little bit here so far, that we're really looking for like a first or second best player. We saw this last year when it came down to the players who got votes, right? There are a couple different like categories of players that tend to get votes. There's that second year player that makes a jump from either some like bad or decent rookie year to becoming pretty good their second year. So they're like jumping up quality from like 20 to 50. Those guys never win, but they're people who often get votes. I also think almost every year we see someone who's like a not so great bench player jump to solid starter. That would be the Kobe White category last year. There are guys who jump from all-star or like a fringe all-star to an MVP candidate. That was basically what Jalen Brunson did, and he finished fifth last year. And then we saw that from Shea the year before, where he finished, I think it was like fourth in most improved player, but also jumped up a ton from being a guy who was just considered good to being an MVP candidate. And then the last category that I often think about when I'm looking at that is there's the first-time All-Stars as well. So I divide up into sort of those different categories of who I'm looking at, and I'm honing in most on those players who are going to be All-Stars for the first time and who can be the first or second leading scorer on their team.
Okay. I've got another kind of threshold I was looking at because I decided to go the advanced metrics route because I'm a nerd. I did look at BPM. Shout out to Brandon. And I'm looking at EPM a little bit as well, but BPM, we've got further data back, so I decided to go ahead and rely on that. And I'm not going to give you the numbers for the BPM jump because it's just going to be me rattling off figures, right? What I will tell you is you're basically looking for about a 1.6 jump in their BPM season over season. And so that gives you kind of a guiding light to go look at last year's season on Basketball Reference and look at like a 1.6. The other way to kind of think about this is a lot of these players, they start at something like very low, right? They start very low in terms of it being about 1 or somewhere in that range, and they jump to about like a 3. And that jump is pretty consistent across these 15-year category. Now, there's like outliers where like Ja jumped from a 1.6 to a 5.4. That's your MVP jump. That goes from like, hey, he's like a really good player to, oh, shit, he's like one of the 10 best players in the NBA. And that jump does matter more, I think, than it used to, which is interesting. That and the where you were drafted thing are the biggest changes that I'm very baffled by. Where, like, at some point along the way, the voters were just like, yeah, no, it's fine if you were drafted second overall. And I'm like, you're supposed to be good. Like, it kind of bothers me because I'm just like, if you were drafted second overall, the expectation is that you are a franchise player, all-star, all-NBA selection. And so you getting there really shouldn't be like I get the idea of most improved. You improve the most season over season, but it is just kind of weird to me to be like, you're the most improved player, even though we expected you to, which is why we drafted you second. Like, it's just a very weird thing, but we are kind of seeing that as an overall trend of the expectation doesn't hurt you here. If you are highly touted as a prospect, that doesn't hurt you here. A 1 hasn't won it. Again, leading into foreshadowing, a 1 hasn't won it in the last 15 years. But I do think it's like an interesting kind of dynamic where the expectation is no longer relevant in this conversation. It's just what were you before, and then what did you jump to? Which maybe it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree there for sure. I think one thing I'm looking at, not BPM wise, but every player has increased their scoring average by at least 4.5 points. So that's like a good minimum threshold. I have a feeling that in 5-10 years from now, we'll look back at that Ja 1 as being almost an outlier, as a guy who won Rookie of the Year and then 2 years later won Most Improved Player. I even think now some people look back at that with regret, the same way that some voters look back at the MVP for Russ with that same level of like, ooh, maybe we should have given it to Harden that year, or Kawhi, or LeBron, right? I think we're going to look back in the same way where and the vote was close at the end, but where he was already good, he was already a past rookie of the year, and then to give it to him just 2 years later, like we already knew that guy was expected to make those jumps, and for him to make it and come and be considered the most improved player, I think will end up being seen more as an anomaly, but we'll see.
So let's go through some of these names that are on the leaderboard, and then we'll get into our best bets. So Victor Wembanyama is the odds-on favorite. Not odds-on, but he is the favorite for this award. Now he's odds-on for Defensive Player of the Year, but he is plus 650 to win this award. Look, I just got done saying expectations not a problem, but I don't have any possible concept of how the voters could be like, yes, Victor Wembanyama, who we all agree is one of the best and most impactful players in the league already, is now also the most improved. Like, if you think Victor Wembanyama is the most improved player next season, just vote him for MVP and then bet all of Brandon Anderson's Spurs alts. Just go that route, because he's definitely won those, and there's more paths there. What do you think about Victor Wembanyama as the favorite in this market?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Every year we see second-year players being given shorter odds, whether it's, I mean, this year, obviously Victor is the favorite, which is confusing, but Podziemski on the Warriors, Keontae George, Chet Holmgren, Derek Lively, Scoot Henderson, Amin Thompson, they all have odds that are like between 30 and 60 to 1, and none of those guys are winning the award almost certainly. For Wemby, we've already seen players like him on 3 separate occasions do exactly what we're expecting, right? We saw Luka a few years ago go from a rookie of the year averaging 20 points to 28 points all-star, finishing 4th in MVP. And even in that season, he still only finished 3rd in most improved player. LeBron did the same thing. KD did the same thing. He wasn't an all-star, but the same base idea. If they went from averaging around 20 to over 28, and none of those guys won because we just don't give it to players like that who are rookies of the year, who are making the most obvious jump we're expecting from a generational prospect. So I think it's silly that he's 8 to 1. I wouldn't bet him at 100 to 1. I don't think he has any chance of winning this award.
Number 2 on the list is Jonathan Kuminga, which I get, right? Made a big jump last year, made a big splash. Premier market team, Clay's gone, right? I don't necessarily see Kuminga as like jumping into this kind of range. If he does, then Brandon's Warriors overs are going to hit, which again, you can just bet those, which there's more pathways there. You can win the Warriors division, those kind of bets, if you think this is possible. At 10 to 1, like, I get it. He should see more opportunity. He had an interview this week talking about how he sees himself as a small forward, and basically a small forward only, which I thought was interesting given kind of the roster makeup of the Warriors. There's also, I will just say this, like, there's not a, you could say like, well, Clay's gone. That's true. But they added Buddy Hield, who's going to take up a fair amount of 3-pointers even off of the bench. He's going to take up a fair amount of usage offensively. Kyle Anderson's not going to add much. That's fine. D'Anthony Melton's not going to be a high usage offensive player. That's fine. But like, I don't know necessarily, especially with Podziemski and how good he is and how much faith the Warriors have in him. I don't know if like Kuminga is going to make this jump to being the second best player on the team, let alone leading a team with Steph Curry and scoring. So I'm not very high on the Kuminga idea either. What's your thought on Kuminga?
Yeah, Kuminga is one of the players I looked really long and hard at. As you mentioned, Clay left. I do think that the additions of Hield and Kyle Anderson, D'Anthony Melton, right, together they almost bring the same offensive impact that Clay had. I'm less distracted by sort of those things and partially by the fact that it doesn't always seem like the Warriors completely believe in him. Those comments about him being want to be a small forward, that doesn't make sense in the context of the team. And he would definitely have a lower usage if he were the small forward because they wouldn't be relying on him as much. I think there's a great chance that he ends up being someone who is considered for this award, but we're talking about a pretty large jump, and they haven't even made a commitment to him long term. Like, he could be traded this season for someone else. So I'm not 100% on the Kuminga bandwagon. It's definitely a guy I'm keeping my eye on as the season goes on, but I agree those odds they're short right now. He's definitely one of those guys you mentioned like early in the season. If the season starts and we're talking about a guy with 25% usage and he's averaging 24 points and we could bet him at 6 to 1 instead of 10 to 1, like I'm all over that. and then I'm going to hit it up. But for now, it's too much risk.
Yeah, I mean, I get the idea. If you project him that way, then you can bet that down. You can express that opinion in the marketplace. I'm willing to go ahead and lose a little CLV just by waiting to see whether or not he gets the role. Him and Kerr have just gone head to head a lot. Like they've just butted
over
heads
and over
a ton.
again.
And him and Draymond have done the same. And like Draymond's had comments about their relationship and it being like, okay, and they'll figure it out. And what I just, it's not all copacetic, and that makes me like a cautious enough to go ahead and hold off.
There are too many red flags. I completely agree. And also the West already is crowded with all-stars, potential all-stars. And so imagine the Warriors winning enough games for him to be considered along with Steph. It's too many red flags shouting at you that this is a guy to avoid at this moment.
This is a popular one, this next one. Josh Giddey's headed to a new team. It's his 4th year in the league. He does fit the statistical stuff I mentioned with where his BPM was last year. I eliminated teams that I don't think are going to win enough games, and I would say that Josh Giddey is probably not going to win enough games, so that's one of the reasons I don't want to bet him right now. It's very popular, though. I'm not sure why. He's a pure passer. I could see Josh having a very good season for Chicago, but like all of the stuff I look at with Chicago is like, I think Kobe White's going to have a good year. And I think Josh Giddey's going to have a good year. And I think Ayo Dosunmu is going to have a good year. And I think Patrick Williams, if his foot gets healthy, which is, by the way, that's terrifying, the news about him, is going to have a good year. And I think it's possible that Zach LaVine could have a bounce back season and this and that. And hey, I really like Mattis Bazelis and what I saw from him in Summer League. And then it's like, okay, so how many games are you going to win? And I'm like, probably less than 30. Like they're just not going to be any good. And so for a non-scorer on a bad team, I can't really get in on Josh Giddey here at 12-1.
Yeah, I think of all the guys on the list, I think ultimately he's the most likely person we might cover today, other than Wemby, whose points per game is going to go up by like 4.5 points. Just because he started from like this lower threshold and he's going to play more minutes, they're going to give him the ball more. But yeah, I'm for sure not a believer in the Bulls as a team this season. I mean, any team that loses their 2 best players and Caruso is their defensive anchor and DeRozan's the offensive anchor, like I don't see them winning anywhere close to 37 games. And then I completely agree with you, right? He has a ceiling on his scoring. He's not going to average more than like 18 at the upper threshold, and he's very unlikely to be an all-star for those reasons. And it's just guys like that don't win, right? Even if he's averaging close to a triple-double, he's scoring. He's not going to have enough of scoring usage, and his defense is also terrible, which is part of the reason why I think the Bulls are not going to be very good. So for those reasons, especially like he's someone I'm definitely avoiding and not believing in.
4th shortest odds here is Evan Mobley, and I'm not down on Mobley. I thought he was going to be the best player in the draft. I love what I saw from his rookie season. I started using the Slim Duncan nickname with him, which that was a little presumptuous. Got a little bit out over the skis a little bit there. Mobley showed that he could spread the floor last year, but the problem is the Cavs last year very cleanly were like, look, the way to simplify this offense and the complications that we have is for Donovan Mitchell to run high pick and roll with Jared Allen and people to space around him. And that's one of the reasons why Darius Garland and Evan Mobley struggled a little bit in the 4-man lineups, and they were good the year before, and that's an important sample to consider. I don't see any reason why Evan Mobley is going to see what would be around a 6-point jump for him to get it to 21 points per game in this Cavs offense. They value his defense and rebounding. It's good that he can spread the floor. I think Mobley can have a fantastic season as an efficient spot-up weapon, little bit of post moves when Mitchell's out of the game, little bit of dynamicism on his own, developing his own offense off the dribble, much the way Jaren Jackson did about this point in his career. But I do not see him putting in the kind of numbers that are going to get him in the most improved category. If he shows that he is that valuable, then he's probably on the defensive end, just betting for DPOI. So I don't understand why Evan Mobley would be one of the shorter bets here either.
Yeah, I think the Jaren Jackson comparison's a good one where he did take a leap and he was rewarded, and it was not for this award, it was for Defensive Player of the Year. And I think that's the better bet here. I do think that part of the Cavs is we don't know exactly what it's going to look like with a new coach and Kenny Atkinson, but it's clear at least on the offensive end, like their offense is going to continue to go through Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and he's not an offensive force. He's going to get better as time goes on, but he's not the kind of guy who's going to be the offensive fulcrum of this team. There are already two guys who they're relying on to do that. And I do think his upside comes on the defensive end. If he really thrives and takes a huge leap, then we should be betting him for Defensive Player of the Year and not for Most Improved Player.
Okay, we'll go a little bit quicker, and then we'll get to your best bets. Talk to me about Trey Murphy, because that's a name I know you wanted to mention here. And he's, look, Trey Murphy Hive. This Buckets podcast is a Trey Murphy podcast. I love Trey Murphy. I beg the Pelicans to trade Brandon Ingram so we can get better lineups for Trey Murphy. But trying to figure out if he can actually land into a Most Improved role. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Maxey situation last year. Obviously, there are more guys in front of Trey Murphy than James Harden was for Maxey, but at this time last year, we weren't sure if Harden was going to get dealt. And I'm not as plugged into the Pelicans and what their trade moves and what their discussions are. But if Brandon Ingram gets dealt, like we're talking about a guy who would immediately see a huge jump in usage, would bump it for sure into the starting lineup, and his points per game would jump. I mean, if they were given the opportunity, I think this guy would be a surefire, easy bet, and his odds are too long. It's just a question of how likely is it that Ingram's going to get traded and the rest of the guys around them are going to stay healthy, because he has the talent. It's just the opportunity, and the guys in front of him are just blocking the way. So
you're going to have a phenomenal bet. You're going to have a phenomenal ticket if Brandon Ingram gets traded, and you're going to feel like the smartest motherfucker on the face of the earth. But if not, you just have this ticket. Like, and that's fine. We bet a lot of things. That's fine if you want to take the because like this is, it's prospecting, right? So it's like, is there a possibility that Brandon Ingram gets traded between now and December 1st? Absolutely, 100%. I personally ask what the hell they're waiting for. But is there a strong possibility he finishes the season with the Pelicans? Yes, there's a strong possibility of that. There's
so
a
in
stronger
your opinion,
possibility. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what do you think is the percent chance that Ingram finishes the season on the Pelicans?
So just because doing trades like this in this environment for that contract with this CBA, I would put it 70-30 that he stays. And if you're like, but they're not going to extend him. It's like, well, they haven't extended him yet. Like, if they have to try and get to free agency with him and re-sign him, they'll still be able to offer more money. And very few players turn down the extra year and more money. So, like, there's just, like, a lot of ways that this turns out. And it may be, like, they feel a lot of pressure to trade him by the deadline, but they don't get the deal they want. Because this is one of the problems is, okay, we've decided that we probably need to trade Brandon Ingram. But what do you mean by that is we've decided to trade Brandon Ingram for the return that we think is appropriate. And the market has to comply with that. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. It's just like in betting where you're like, I'm ready to bet the Jets. Oh, I don't like that number. I'm not going to bet them. Same deal.
Yeah.
So, like, we're talking about market economics. So, like, that dynamic, I think, is kind of the same here.
I was going to say about 75%, the same idea. And I think it's not only that Ingram gets traded, right? We're also to be, like, they have to be willing to give him the ball. They have to be, like, Zion might even need to be hurt because he's has such a high usage too. And with, like, Murray, it's a lot of guys. But the moment he gets the opportunity, I think it's there. And it's something to keep an eye on potentially even for next season too. If we see something that's long and they finally made the change to give them more of a focus on their team.
I do need to mention, I've already got a ticket in on RJ Barrett. And I'm going to, like, that's another best bet I should have added to this line. I do like the odds here. Barrett he fits all of the categories. And if you just look at his performance when he got to Toronto, Barrett fits all these categories. He was phenomenal when he got to Toronto. Like, he was really good with the Knicks, and then he was terrific when he got to Toronto. This is the opposite of a lot of those bets we talked about where I said, if you like Victor for this award, just bet the Spurs over. This is the opposite. At 30-1 or longer, this is an awesome opportunity for you to be like, I think the Raptors are going to be pretty good. If the Raptors are pretty good, RJ Barrett's probably a big chunk of that. And if not, it's Scotty Barnes. What do you think about the Raptors, Barnes, Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley and their chances for Most Improved?
Yeah, the first time I ran through this, I was also all over Barrett because of that huge jump in Toronto. He shot 15% better at the rim when he got there, and he shot 6% better from three, which are just huge, huge leaps. I think those are pretty unsustainable. As I dove more into the Raptors, I also think similar to the Bulls, they're just not going to be very good. They don't have enough talent. It doesn't unclear if it really fits together, and they're relying a lot on Quickly, Barrett, and Barnes. Barnes is obviously a first-time All-Star, and I'm a big fan of Emmanuel Quickly. His plus-minus numbers have just been outrageous every team he's played on in every season. But it's the same thing. It's like Barnes is clear in front of them, and they're not going to be good enough. And so it just doesn't seem like there'll ultimately be the right combination of opportunity and overall talent on the team. And for Barrett especially, it's just the regression there. It seems so likely. It's almost like what we saw from Mikal Bridges 2 years ago when he got to Brooklyn. He was given more opportunity, his scoring went up, and just that's not sustainable. It's not the kind of player he is.
Yeah, and I think Barnes I have a hard time with because I think the narrative is going to be tough here, where I do think the voters will be like, wait a minute, like he was like the best player on like a playoff team. Or like one of them. Like, I just feel like there's going to be like a little bit of a, wait, he's been here. Like, Barnes has already been here. So I have a hard time believing that Barnes is going to be a serious candidate, though I think the numbers profile is like, hey, if he makes another leap, then he jumps into that MVP conversation like Ja did, and then it's like, all right, like if he's putting up outrageous numbers just to be in like the top 10 conversation, that might do it. But I still think there's probably some value on Barrett. Let's get to our best bets. Give me the cap on Jalen Williams and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and why, by the way, this is Jalen, not Jaylen, and why you think Jalen Williams can win most improved.
Yeah, of all the guys we've talked about other than Wemby, I think Jalen Williams is the most likely guy to be an all-star on this list. I think the Thunder are going to be a juggernaut. I think they're most likely to win the most games in the NBA. Their offense and defense are going to be better than they were last year. And with Giddey gone, there's just a new place for him to have even higher usage and more opportunity. He looks a lot like Maxey sort of looked like the year before, where he shot really well, he was efficient, and his usage was 23%, but it wasn't that astronomical figure. And Maxey's usage jumped up to 29%, was a clear all-star, and one most improved player. And I think if we see Jalen Williams' usage jump, his points per game are clearly going to go up. I see him averaging 24 to 25 points per game, and being just a clear-cut all-star on the best team in the West. And that sort of player is someone who exactly fits the profile of most improved player.
Okay, look, I love J-Dub. I love his game. I think he's going to get better. I think he's awesome. I think there will be an increased opportunity with Giddey gone. Some of that's going to go Chet, but I think some of that's going to go J-Dub. I don't mind the bet whatsoever, and he's a guy that I'll definitely have an eye on early in the season as well. He might be one of those guys I jump on real quick there. Jalen Johnson is the nerds selection for most improved. We all love him because he pops in all the advanced metrics. He made a big jump last year. He's like one of the most serious and competent players on that wreck of a team that I constantly clash with Jim Turvey about. Give me the case for Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Jalen Johnson since actually it's the only time I've ever gone to Summer League. I went to a Summer League game and saw the Hawks, and he just jumped off. He just jumped off the court. He was incredible. He was clearly the guy all over the place. His athleticism was off the charts, and you could see this guy was going to be a player. And as they've given more and more opportunity, it's obviously grown. I'm not the only one at the Action Network who likes him at these odds. They seem a little bit long. He clearly took a leap and got much better last year, and there's still more opportunity because of all the players who are gone from the Hawks going into this year. So they lost more points per game on a pure numbers basis than any other team in the NBA did, with the trading of DeJounte Murray and Saddiq Bey not coming back. And there's like 35 points per game. And where are those points going to come from? And the most likely place is from Jalen Johnson. I'm not sure if he is the kind of player who can ultimately get to that all-star status, but the Hawks are even a little bit better than people think, which I think is a possibility, especially because the fit of DeJounte and Trey was just so unbelievably awful. Then he would be a player who is an all-star consideration and the second leading scorer on their team, and just the kind of guy who, when we sit back and look at it, has a really good chance to be a contender for most improved player. And he does have a lot of room to go with his usage. I mean, he's still, with that increase last year, his usage was under 20%, which if you divide up the usage exactly evenly on the court, right, everyone would have 20%. So he was a below average usage player. And so just jumping up and having more opportunities to both have the ball in his hands, hit open threes, or be on the short roll for Trey, like it's just many chances for him to score more points and be a more important part of the offense.
Yeah, I'm willing to go ahead and go against consensus on this. It's not that I don't see it. Like, I think Jalen's really valuable. I just don't see him having the statistical profile to win the award.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like we're going to look at this and be like, you know who's actually probably should win this award is Jalen Johnson. And then it's like, but this other guy scored a bunch, and then that's how he loses. And I don't think it's a bad bet. I think a lot of our guys are going to be on Jalen Johnson. A lot of our guys in the Action Network Slack are on Jalen Johnson. You'll hear a lot more of them in the coming weeks here on our Best Bets episodes leading up to the season. I'll give my bets real quick. So Jalen Suggs fits into all the categories I talked about. He was drafted 5th overall. He is 23 years old. Maltman, what do you think Jalen Suggs shot from 3 last year?
He shot, what was it? It was like 42%. It was something outrageous.
It was 39%?
Yeah.
And I would have sworn to God it was 31. I was like, oh, Jalen can't shoot. Like, that's the whole book on him is, like, he can't score at all. 39.7%, 40% from 3. Like, 47% from the field. And that's with him playing 27 minutes a game. That's going to go up. They did the Anthony Black thing last year. That did not work out. They went to KCP. My understanding is that Suggs went to the team and was like, hey, you know, it's your decision, but I think I can play point. I think I can handle playing point guard. And their decisions absolutely back that up. Like, that seems very evident that that's what they're going to do, right? Like, we look at this, at the way this team is set up, and it's like center, Paolo, Franz. That's whoever winds up at center, that's pretty set. KCP is definitely not a 1, he's a 2, and you just paid a ton of money for him. They let Markelle Fultz go. It's going to be Jalen Suggs. Suggs is going to start at point guard. So we're going to see a jump in assists. We're going to see a jump in scoring. We're going to see a jump in all of those kind of categories. And he is an elite defender, and that's going to take some energy off of him. But overall, I think that there's a very strong possibility that Suggs does make a jump in here. Now, he was at 12.6 last year, 13 points per game. And so to get to that 21, it's like, do you really think he's going to get a jump that much between 8 and 11 points? No, but do I think it's possible that his efficiency and playmaking make up for it? Yeah, I can see that happening. I think there's a pretty good case here for Jalen Suggs, who, by the way, at Bet Rivers is 100-1, as Maltman let me know earlier this afternoon. So thanks for that heads up. Make sure to grab that over at Bet Rivers.
100-1 is really, I mean, it's long for anyone.
Sure.
At the beginning of the season last year, they were trying Fultz more playing the point guard and Jalen Suggs playing the 2, and that clearly didn't work. And definitely they're going to put the ball in his hands more than he had last year as the team's primary point guard. And he is, I mean, he's one of the 3 pillars on this team, along with Franz and Paolo, where they're going to go to those guys. I see him, he is going to play point guard for that team, but he is going to be the 3rd option on offense the entire time behind Franz and Paolo. And I'm not sure, we'll get this with Franz also, but I'm just not sure there's enough room on the Magic to just grow offensively, because there still are, 3 guys who are looking to have the ball in their hands. And also bringing KCP, like they didn't bring him in just to stand in the corner and never shoot the ball. Like, he's going to take threes. He's going to score 12 points a game and be a player and a factor on that team. And Jalen Suggs, I think that offensive leap has already happened. That 3-point shooting was an incredible jump. I can't imagine that going any higher. In fact, I think it's probably more likely to fall down a little bit. And as you mentioned, like, he is going to take that huge burden on the defensive end of the court, and guys who are just playing more on defense, they're just not as much on offense for sure. So I think that number is long. It's not one I'm personally going to touch because I just don't think he can get to that all-star status, but he's a great player who will definitely get better next year. And he is sort of like Derek White, right? There were people who were making the argument for Derek White last year for most improved player, and he was way better. He clearly made a huge jump. Just no one considered him for most improved player because guys like that don't win.
Yeah, I'm taking the other Magic here, so I'm hedging my bets with one of them will jump. Surely the offense has to be better. Maybe the answer is just going to be Paolo Banchero. It might just wind up being like Paolo Banchero with the number 1 pick. But Franz Wagner is my other one at 61. Look, Franz shot terribly from 3 last year. He'll shoot better this year. That I don't think it's possible for him to shoot worse, so he should jump in that category. I think that part of this is like I am betting on a little bit of Magic regression offensively, and maybe that's misguided. Maybe Jamal Mosley's teams are just gonna be bad offensively, and this team's still not gonna be able to shoot. I think KCP helps the spacing, so it help a little bit there. Franz is a really phenomenal feel for the game on ball weapon. And so I think there's room for him to improve here. I think actually a lot of this is he was sneaky, really great, and arguably rookie of the year when he was drafted. And now there's a good opportunity here after a down year for him to make an even bigger jump for a team that we know is going to be good. So at 60-1, I'm willing to bet Franz Wagner.
Yeah, I was all over Franz last year, similar to you were over Maxey the year before, of just a guy who has the opportunity, he can grow, he can be better. And I mean, I'm a huge Franz fan. His entire career, it's similar to we were talking about quickly before, but whenever he's on the court, the Magic just play better. And part of that is because he's such a big guy who's playing small forward, who can play small forward. So he's helping out with rebounding, he's helping out with defense. He's just a problem on both sides of the floor because of his size and his ability to play almost down a position. I definitely think that the Magic offense would hopefully be better. And if it is, it's got to be either him or Paolo, most likely, who are the ones who are driving that better offense. It's just hard to see that. They don't have the greatest spacing in the world. Paolo himself has a high usage, controls the ball a lot, and doesn't shoot the most efficiently. I think Franz can improve. I think that of all the players out there who don't meet that criteria for me of like losing a high value score, which the Magic don't, he would be the one I would be most inclined to bet. But because they don't meet that criteria, I've just knocked all those guys off as I'm just not touching them because just it's been so long since one of the guys have won. Obviously, if the season starts and someone gets hurt or like Wendell's out for the year, or Paolo like misses 4 months, like that changes everything. And then your ticket looks incredible. And we could see too, I mean, if the season starts and he's handling the ball a ton more and they're just going to him, then I would definitely be on this as well. So it's a player to keep an eye on for sure.
All right, Jalen Williams, 22-1. Jalen Johnson, 22-1. Those are Maltman's best bets. I've got Jalen Suggs, 34-1. Franz Wagner, 60-1. And RJ Barrett, who's currently 30-1 in the market. I grabbed him earlier this summer at 40-1. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. My thanks to Tito Banach and David Payne, our producer on the audio side. We'll be back next week as we carry on with the rest of NBA preseason stuff. We're going to start getting into some of the other futures as we continue on here. Make sure to check out youtube.com/The Action Network and download the Action Network app. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.